It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Alex and Elena pulled into the crowded shopping center parking lot. The summer heat was making the asphalt shimmer, and Elena was already dreaming about the air conditioning waiting for them, at home. They had just finished their weekly grocery shopping. Nothing special, just the usual bread, milk, eggs, and that chocolate ice cream Alex loved so much. Elena was carefully arranging the last of their shopping bags in the trunk while Alex folded up the cart. They weren't being slow on purpose. If anything, they were moving faster than usual because dark clouds were gathering in the distance, promising an afternoon thunderstorm. That's when they heard it, the angry, persistent honking from a silver SUV that had been waiting for their parking spot. At first, they tried to ignore it. Everyone gets impatient sometimes, right? But the honking didn't stop. If anything, it got louder and more aggressive. "We're hurrying as fast as we can," Alex muttered, closing the trunk with a solid thud. Elena glanced over her shoulder and caught sight of the woman behind the wheel. Mid-50s, blonde hair, cut in an expensive-looking bob, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, and an expression of pure rage on her face. The woman rolled down her window and shouted something they couldn't quite hear over the noise of the busy parking lot. Elena gave a small, apologetic wave, hoping that would be the end of it. They were already heading to the driver's side door. Just another 30 seconds and they'd be out of her way, but that wasn't good enough for the woman in the SUV. She slammed her palm against her steering wheel, hitting the horn again. This time other shoppers turned to look. An older man pushing a cart full of gardening supplies paused, frowning at the commotion. A teenage girl stopped texting and stared openly. "What's her problem?" Elena whispered as Alex unlocked the car. "It's not like we're taking forever. Some people just wake up looking for trouble," Alex said with a shrug, opening the door for Elena. "Let's just go and—" But before Alex could finish the sentence, the SUV's door flew open. The woman emerged, slamming her door so hard the entire vehicle shook. She was taller than she'd appeared behind the wheel, wearing an expensive-looking white blouse and designer jeans. Her face was flushed with anger as she stomped toward them, her high-heeled sandals clicking aggressively against the pavement. "Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the entire parking area. "Some of us have actual appointments to keep." Alex stepped slightly in front of Elena, hands raised in a calming gesture. "Ma'am, we're just leaving now. There's no need for—" "Don't you ma'am me," the woman snapped, pointing a manicured finger at Alex's chest. "I've been watching you two dawdle for 5 minutes now. It's people like you who have no consideration for others." Elena felt her heart begin to race. What had started as a minor inconvenience was quickly turning into something much more concerning. The woman's eyes were wild, her breathing heavy. Over her shoulder, Elena could see curious onlookers gathering, some with phones already raised to record whatever might happen next. Little did they know just how quickly this parking lot dispute was about to spiral completely out of control. The woman's face was getting redder by the second as she stood there in the parking lot. Alex tried once more to calm things down. "Look, we're literally getting in our car right now. You'll have the spot in 30 seconds. But the woman wasn't listening. She took another step closer and Elena noticed how her hands were shaking with anger. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. Do you have any idea who I am? My husband is friends with the owner of this entire shopping center." A small crowd was starting to gather now. An older couple had stopped loading their groceries to watch. A young man with a toddler in his shopping cart quickly moved away from the scene, shielding his child's ears from the woman's increasingly loud voice. "Please, we don't want any trouble," Elena said, finally finding her voice. She stepped out from behind Alex, keeping her tone calm and even. "We're leaving right now." The woman's eyes narrowed as she turned her attention to Elena. "Oh, so now your wife is going to fight your battles? What kind of man are you anyway?" Alex's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a store employee in a blue vest approached, cautiously. "Everything okay over here?" he asked, looking nervously between the three of them. "No, everything is not okay," the woman snapped. "These people are deliberately taking their time just to annoy me. I've been waiting for 5 minutes." The employee, whose name tag read Tom, looked at his watch. Ma'am, I actually saw them come out of the store just 2 minutes ago. They're not doing anything wrong. This only seemed to make the woman angrier. She pointed her finger at Tom's face. So, you're taking their side? I spend thousands of dollars in this store every month, and this is how you treat your best customers? Tom took a step backward, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. I'm just saying there's no need for— You'll be hearing from my husband about this, the woman interrupted. He plays golf with your district manager. Elena reached for Alex's hand, squeezing it tightly. This woman wasn't just rude. Something seemed off about her. The way her eyes darted around, how she couldn't seem to stand still. Elena had worked in a hospital long enough to recognize someone who might not be entirely stable. Let's just go, she whispered to Alex. We can find another spot. But as they started to move toward their car, the woman stepped directly in their path. Don't you dare walk away from me. I'm not finished. A tall man with a grocery bag in one hand and car keys in the other stopped nearby. Hey, is everything all right here? He called out, his voice steady and calm. The woman spun around. Mind your own business, she shouted. The man didn't back down. I think maybe everybody needs to take a deep breath. It's just a parking spot. Just a parking spot? The woman repeated, her voice rising to an almost hysterical pitch. It's about respect. These people have no respect. Elena noticed that the woman's expensive purse was hanging open, and she kept reaching toward it, her fingers twitching nervously. Something about that gesture made Elena's stomach drop. Alex, she said quietly, I think we should call someone. The woman overheard her. Oh, you want to call someone? Go ahead. Call whoever you want. My brother-in-law is the police chief in this county. By now, a small semicircle of concerned shoppers had formed around them. Phones were out, recording the meltdown. The store manager had joined Tom, speaking quietly into his radio. No one expected what happened next. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out something that made everyone freeze in place. The afternoon sun glinted off metal as she raised her hand, pointing directly at Elena. Now, she said, her voice suddenly quiet and controlled. You're going to apologize to me. Right now. Time seemed to freeze as everyone in the parking lot stared in shock. The woman was holding a small black handgun, pointing it directly at Elena's chest. The metal caught the sunlight, making it look almost unreal, like a prop from a movie. But the weight of silence that fell over the crowd made it clear. This was no toy. I said apologize, the woman repeated, her voice eerily calm now compared to her earlier shouting. Her hand was steady, finger resting just outside the trigger guard. Alex's face drained of all color. Put that down, please. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. In all her 32 years, she'd never had a weapon pointed at her. She felt like she was floating outside her body, watching the scene unfold from somewhere above. This couldn't be real. Not over a parking space, not on a Tuesday afternoon with groceries melting in the trunk. The store manager dropped his radio with a clatter. Ma'am, please, there's no need for this, he said, his hands visibly shaking. We can all talk this through. I'm done talking, the woman replied, not taking her eyes off Elena. I've been disrespected for the last time. Nobody listens until you make them listen. Phones were still recording, but now people were backing away, ducking behind cars. A mother pulled her crying child against her chest. Someone was shouting for someone else to call 911. I'm sorry, Elena finally managed to say, her mouth dry as sand. I'm truly sorry if we upset you. She tried to keep her voice steady, remembering something she'd read once about staying calm in crisis situations. The woman's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That doesn't sound very sincere. To me. Try again. Alex was inching slowly toward Elena, trying to put himself between her and the gun. His movement caught the woman's attention. Stay right where you are, she snapped, gesturing with the weapon. One more step and I'll show everyone here how serious I am. Alex froze, his hands up in surrender. Okay. I'm not moving. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone had called the police. The woman's head jerked toward the sound, and for a split second, uncertainty flickered across her face. They're coming for you, Alex said carefully. This has gone too far. Please, put the gun down before someone gets hurt. The woman's eyes narrowed. You called them, didn't you? You think I'm scared of the police? My brother-in-law will have this all sorted out in 5 minutes. A tall man in a navy blue polo shirt and khaki shorts had been watching from behind a nearby SUV. He was middle-aged with salt and pepper hair, his eyes focused and calculating as he assessed the situation. While everyone else was backing away, he was slowly moving closer. Elena noticed him first, the deliberate way he was positioning himself, the calm concentration on his face. He didn't look scared. He looked prepared. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her the smallest nod. The woman was still ranting, waving the gun between Alex and Elena. You people think you can just walk all over everyone, take as much time as you want, while important people like me have to wait. The man in the blue polo was now just a few yards away, slightly behind the woman. He caught Alex's eye and held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. What happened next unfolded in what felt like slow motion. As the man lunged forward, the woman somehow sensed his presence. She started to turn, the gun swinging wildly in his direction. Elena screamed. Alex dove toward Elena, knocking her to the ground and covering her body with his own. There was a shout, a scuffle, and then a dull thud as 2 bodies hit the pavement hard. The gun skittered across the asphalt, stopping against a shopping cart. When Elena managed to look up from underneath Alex's protective embrace, her heart still hammering in her chest, she saw something she never expected. The woman who had been threatening them seconds ago was now face down on the ground, the man in the blue polo shirt firmly holding her in place with practiced efficiency. The man in the blue polo shirt had the woman pinned firmly to the ground, his knee pressed against her back while he held her arms behind her. The gun lay several feet away where another shopper had quickly kicked it even further from reach. I'm an off-duty police officer, the man announced loudly, his voice carrying across the now silent parking lot. Someone secure that weapon, and call 911 if you haven't already. Alex was still shielding Elena with his body, both of them breathing hard. Slowly, he helped her to her feet, keeping his arm protectively around her shoulders. Elena's legs felt like jelly, and she leaned heavily against him. Are you okay? Alex whispered, his eyes searching her face. She nodded, unable to form words, just yet. The store manager approached the gun cautiously, removing his jacket to wrap around it without touching it directly. Police are on their way, he called out. Dispatcher says 2 minutes out. The woman on the ground wasn't silent. Get off me, she screamed, her face pressed uncomfortably against the hot pavement. Do you know who I am? My husband will have your badge for this. You're hurting me. The off-duty officer didn't loosen his hold. Ma'am, you just pointed a loaded weapon at innocent people in a public place. Please stop talking and wait for my colleagues to arrive. More sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder by the second. People who had been hiding behind cars began to cautiously emerge. Phones were still recording everything. Elena realized with a strange detachment that this would probably be all over the internet by dinner time. A young woman with curly hair approached Alex and Elena. Are you guys all right? I can't even believe what just happened. I think we're in shock, Alex replied honestly, his arms still tight around Elena's shoulders. The young woman nodded. I recorded everything, if you need it for, pressing charges or whatever. Thank you, Elena managed to say. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, like it was coming from somewhere far away. The first police car screeched into the parking lot, lights flashing. 2 uniformed officers jumped out, hands hovering near their weapons as they assessed the scene. The off-duty officer called out to them. Officer Thomas Reynolds, Pine Creek PD. I've got the situation contained. Weapon is secured over there with the store manager. The tension visibly left the responding officer's shoulders as they recognized one of their own. They approached quickly, one taking control of the woman while the other retrieved the wrapped gun. As soon as the woman was handcuffed and in police custody, Officer Reynolds stood up, brushing off his knees. He looked over at Alex and Elena with genuine concern. Are you folks okay? That was a pretty intense situation. Elena found her voice. You saved our lives. How did you know what to do? Officer Reynolds shrugged modestly. Right place, right time. I was just grabbing some steaks for dinner when I heard the commotion. Sometimes 20 years on the force comes in handy even on your day off. More police cars were arriving. An ambulance pulled up, its lights spinning silently. 2 paramedics jumped out and headed straight for Alex and Elena. We should check you both out, one of them said kindly. Shock can have physical symptoms even if you weren't physically injured. As the paramedic wrapped a blood pressure cuff around Elena's arm, she watched the woman being placed in the back of a police car. The woman was still yelling, still making threats, but she looked smaller somehow, less frightening. She needs help, Elena said quietly. There's something wrong with her. Alex squeezed her hand. Don't worry about her right now. Let's just make sure you're okay. One of the officers approached them, notebook in hand. When you're feeling up to it, we'll need statements from both of you. Officer Reynolds has already given us a preliminary report of what he witnessed. The paramedic finished checking Elena's vitals. Your blood pressure is pretty elevated, which is completely normal after what you've been through. Try to take slow, deep breaths. Elena nodded, following the instruction. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. The simple act of focusing on her breathing helped ground her back and her body. Across the parking lot, a news van pulled up. A reporter and cameraman jumped out, already scanning the scene for the best angle. Great, Alex muttered. Just what we need. Officer Reynolds saw them too and quickly intercepted, creating a barrier between the media and Alex and Elena. Local hero, Elena said, watching him explain something to the persistent reporter, firmly but politely keeping them at bay. The officer who'd been questioning them smiled. That's Tom for you, always looking out for people. Now, if you're feeling up to it, can you tell me exactly how this all started? The next few hours passed in a blur. Alex and Elena sat in separate interview rooms at the police station, going over their statements again and again. Officers took photos of some small scratches on Elena's arm from when Alex had pushed her, down to protect her. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal. And you've never seen this woman before today? The detective asked Elena for what felt like the 3rd time. Never, Elena confirmed, taking another sip from the paper cup of lukewarm coffee someone had given her. I would remember her. This wasn't just someone having a bad day. There was something really off about the whole situation. The detective nodded, making another note in his file. We've identified her as Patricia Hoffman, 52 years old. She does have a permit for the weapon, but obviously not for using it to threaten people over parking spaces. He looked up from his notes. You're sure there was no prior interaction, no accidental bump in the store, nothing that might have set her off? Elena shook her head firmly. Nothing. We were just putting our groceries in our car. That's it. As if on cue, Elena's stomach growled loudly. The detective glanced at his watch and looked apologetic. I'm sorry we've kept you so long. Your groceries are probably ruined by now. I don't care about the groceries, Elena said honestly. I just want to go home with my husband and try to process what happened today. The detective closed his folder. Just a few more things to sign, and you'll be free to go. Officer Reynolds will be waiting to speak with you both before you leave. 15 minutes later, Alex and Elena were reunited in the station lobby. Alex immediately pulled her into a tight hug, burying his face in her hair. You okay? He whispered. Better now, she replied, clinging to him. They kept asking me if we'd met her before. Me too. They think there must be something more to the story than just road rage over a parking spot. Officer Reynolds approached them, now dressed in casual clothes rather than his department uniform. He'd clearly been off duty when he arrived at the station. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I wanted to check on you before you headed home. Elena pulled away from Alex but kept hold of his hand. We can't thank you enough for what you did today. The officer shook his head modestly. Anyone would have done the same. No, Alex said firmly. They wouldn't. Most people ran away. You ran toward the danger. Officer Reynolds shrugged. Training kicks in. But listen, I wanted to tell you a bit about what they found in Ms. Hoffman's car. The department won't make this public right away, but I thought you should know, since you were the one staring down the barrel of her gun. He guided them to a quieter corner of the lobby. They found several prescription bottles in her purse. Looks like she's on some pretty serious medication for bipolar disorder and paranoia. Based on the fill dates and how many pills were left, she hasn't been taking them regularly. Elena felt a wave of complicated emotions wash over her. Relief that there was some explanation, sadness for the woman's obvious struggles, but still anger at being put in such danger. There was also an eviction notice in her glove compartment. Officer Reynolds continued, and divorce papers. It looks like she's been sleeping in her car for a few days. The fancy clothes, the talk about her important husband and brother-in-law, it was all part of her delusion. Will she go to jail? Alex asked. That's up to the courts, Officer Reynolds replied. But given her mental state and the circumstances, my guess is she'll be sent for psychiatric evaluation first. This isn't her first run-in with the law, but it's definitely the most serious. Elena thought about the woman's face as she'd pointed the gun. The strange combination of rage and emptiness in her eyes. I hope she gets help, she said quietly. As they walked toward the station exit, Elena noticed a familiar face on one of the waiting room benches, the young woman with curly hair who had offered them the video she'd recorded. That's the witness from the parking lot, she whispered to Alex. The one who recorded everything. The young woman looked up and gave them a small wave. She stood and walked over. Hey, I just wanted to make sure you guys were okay before I gave my statement, she said. That was the scariest thing I've ever seen. We're okay, Alex assured her. Thanks for sticking around to help. The young woman nodded. Of course. Oh, and I don't know if it matters to you, but the video is kind of going viral already. I didn't post it, but someone else must have recorded it too. Elena felt her stomach drop. Viral? Like on the internet? Yeah, it's all over social media. People are calling that officer a hero. She pointed toward Officer Reynolds, who was now talking to another detective. And they're calling that woman all sorts of names. Parking lot Karen is trending. Alex put his arm around Elena's shoulders. Great, just what we need, internet fame. A police officer called the young woman's name, and she excused herself to give her statement. As they finally stepped outside into the early evening air, Elena took a deep breath. The world looked different somehow, brighter, sharper, more precious. She turned to Alex. Let's get takeout on the way home. I don't think either of us is up for cooking tonight. Alex nodded, squeezing her hand. Definitely. And maybe some ice cream. I think we've earned it. As they walked toward their car in the police station parking lot, Elena's phone began buzzing, with notifications. She pulled it out and stared at the screen in disbelief. 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, she said. Everyone we know has seen the video. The courthouse was packed 3 weeks later. Elena sat on a hard wooden bench, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Alex was beside her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. They'd debated whether to attend the hearing at all, but in the end, they felt they needed to see it through. All rise for the Honorable Judge Wilson, called the bailiff. Everyone stood as an older woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes entered the courtroom. She took her seat at the bench and nodded for everyone to sit. Patricia Hoffman looked completely different from the woman who had pointed a gun at Elena. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a simple navy blue dress. Her previously perfect hair hung limp around her face. She sat beside her attorney, eyes downcast, shoulders slumped. The prosecutor, a young woman with a neat ponytail and crisp pantsuit, stood up. Your Honor, the state is charging Ms. Hoffman with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, unlawful brandishing of a firearm, making terroristic threats, and disorderly conduct. We have video evidence from multiple witnesses, as well as the testimony of the victims and Officer Reynolds, who subdued Ms. Hoffman at the scene. Patricia's lawyer, an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face, stood next. Your Honor, we do not dispute the facts of what happened that day. However, We request that the court consider my client's mental state and health circumstances at the time of the incident. The judge peered over her reading glasses. I've reviewed the psychiatric evaluation. Proceed. For the next hour, Patricia's life was laid bare for the court to examine. The divorce after 26 years of marriage, the husband who had cleaned out their accounts before leaving, the loss of her job at a high-end real estate agency, the medication she couldn't afford to refill, the night spent sleeping in her luxury SUV, the last possession she had that made her feel like her old self. Elena found herself feeling an unexpected sympathy for the woman who had threatened her life. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. People could break in so many different ways. Patricia's sister took the stand, tearful as she explained how she'd tried to get Patricia to move in with her, how Patricia's pride had prevented her from accepting help. She's not a violent person, the sister insisted. She's someone who needed help and didn't get it in time. When it was Patricia's turn to speak, she stood shakily, her hands trembling as they had that day in the parking lot, but for very different reasons now. I don't remember much about that day, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I hadn't slept in days. I hadn't eaten. I'd been mixing my old medications with alcohol. She paused, drawing a shaky breath. But I've seen the videos. I've seen what I did, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for it. She turned slightly, finally meeting Elena's eyes across the courtroom. I am so deeply sorry for what I put you through. There's no excuse for what I did. None at all. The judge considered all the evidence, the testimonies, the psychiatric reports. Finally, she delivered her ruling. Ms. Hoffman, what you did was extremely serious and could have resulted in tragedy. However, the court recognizes that you were suffering from a significant mental health crisis at the time. She adjusted her glasses. I am sentencing you to 3 years probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and 500 hours of community service. You will surrender your firearm permanently and your lichen. 6 months had passed since that terrifying day in the parking lot. The seasons had changed, summer giving way to fall, then winter, and now the first hints of spring were appearing. Alex stood in their backyard, carefully planting new flower bulbs along the edge of the patio. Elena watched from the kitchen window, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in her hands. So much had changed in half a year. The nightmares had mostly stopped for Elena, though she still found herself scanning parking lots whenever they went shopping, always alert for potential danger. The therapist they'd been seeing called it a normal response to trauma. Your brain is just trying to keep you safe, she'd explained. It will get easier with time. Elena pushed open the back door with her shoulder and carried the coffee outside. Thought you might need this, she said, handing Alex one of the mugs. Perfect timing, Alex replied, sitting back on his heels and brushing dirt from his hands. These tulips should bloom right around our anniversary. Elena smiled, settling into one of the patio chairs. Hard to believe it's been 6 months since everything. They didn't need to elaborate. The incident, as they'd taken to calling it, had become a dividing line in their lives, before and after. The viral video had eventually faded from social media, replaced by newer dramas and outrages. Occasionally someone still recognized them at the grocery store or gas station, but those moments were becoming rare. Life had largely returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Did you see the email from the community center? Alex asked, taking a sip of his coffee. Elena nodded. About the fundraiser next month? I was thinking we should definitely go. The community center had started a new program providing free mental health services to people in crisis, inspired, partly by what had happened with Patricia. Alex and Elena had become unexpected advocates, sharing their story at community meetings and local news segments. They'd even met with state legislators about improving access to mental health resources. I talked to Officer Reynolds yesterday, Elena said. He's going to be there too. Says his wife is making him wear the medal they gave him. They both smiled at that. Tom Reynolds had become a good friend over the past months. His quick thinking that day had saved lives, and the bond, formed in those terrifying moments, had evolved into a genuine friendship. His wife made amazing lasagna, and game nights at their house had become a monthly tradition. Did he mention if he's heard anything about her? Alex asked carefully. Elena knew exactly who he meant. Patricia? No, he didn't say. Last I heard, she was still in the treatment program and doing well with her probation requirements. They hadn't seen Patricia since the courthouse. Part of Elena wanted to know how she was doing, if she was getting the help she needed. Another part wanted to leave that chapter firmly closed. Sometimes I still can't believe it happened, Alex said, returning to his gardening. 1 minute we're loading groceries, the next minute there's a gun pointed at you. And 5 seconds later she was on the ground, Elena finished. It was strange how a few seconds could change everything. Priorities, perspectives, plans for the future. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their conversation. Elena stood, brushing off her jeans. That must be the delivery. I'll get it. She walked through the house to the front door, checking through the peephole before opening it, another new habit since the incident. A delivery driver stood on the porch, holding a large envelope. Package for Elena Chen, he said cheerfully. She signed for it and thanked him, curious about the contents. The return address was from the publishing company she'd been working with. Back in the yard, she showed Alex the envelope. It's here. His eyes widened. Already? Open it. Elena carefully tore open the package and pulled out a stack of glossy brochures. On the cover was a photo of her and Alex along with the title, When Crisis Strikes, a Guide to Community Resources and Mental Health Support. They look amazing, Alex said softly, taking one from her hands. The brochure had been Elena's idea, a simple guide to local mental health resources, emergency contacts, and information about recognizing signs of crisis. The publishing company had agreed to print 10,000 copies to be distributed throughout the county. Page 3. Elena said, flipping the brochure open. There, in a small box at the bottom of the page, was a brief mention of their story. Not sensationalized, not dramatic, just the facts of what had happened and how it had inspired them to create this resource. Alex read it silently, then looked up at her with pride in his eyes. You did this. You took something terrible and turned it into something that might actually help people. Elena shook her head. We did this. Together. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A reminder for their afternoon appointment. They were speaking at a high school assembly in an hour, talking to teenagers about mental health awareness and resources. It would be the 4th school they'd visited this month. We should get ready to go, she said, showing Alex the reminder. He nodded, gathering his gardening tools. Let me just clean up here. As Alex headed inside to wash up, Elena stood alone in the backyard for a moment. She looked at the brochure in her hands, thinking about the strange, twisted path that had led them here. A random encounter in a parking lot, a woman at her breaking point, a gun that thankfully never fired, a police officer in the right place at the right time. It still frightened her to think about how differently it could have ended. But it hadn't. They were here, alive, and somehow stronger. They were turning their trauma into purpose, their fear into action. Her therapist had told her once that healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about integrating it into your life story in a way that allows you to move forward. Elena was beginning to understand what that meant. Alex appeared at the back door, car keys in hand. Ready to go change some minds about mental health? Elena smiled, gathering the brochures and her coffee mug. As ready as I'll ever be. As they drove to the high school, Elena watched the familiar streets of their town pass by the window. Life would never be exactly the same as before that day in the parking lot. The world felt more fragile now, more unpredictable, but also, somehow more precious. You know what I was thinking? She said suddenly. We should invite Officer Reynolds and his wife over for dinner this weekend. It's been a while since we've seen them outside of all this advocacy work. Alex smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. Perfect idea, I'll call him tonight. The high school came into view ahead of them. Hundreds of teenagers would be waiting inside, many not much younger than they had been when they first met in college. Teenagers who might one day find themselves in crisis or watching a friend struggle, or simply needing to know they weren't alone. Let's do this, Elena said as Alex parked the car. Together, they walked toward the school entrance, brochures in hand, ready to share their story one more time, not because they wanted to relive the trauma, but because they knew that sometimes the most painful chapters can become the most important ones to tell.